Thanks for tuning into the For Those Made to Do podcast. We are your hosts, Mandy Sahota
and Bianca Pavel. This podcast is all about the doers who have achieved career success in the UAE and the stories that go with it.
So we left the last episode challenging Namrata to share her vision for those made to do business education in 2030. So let's dive right back in. It's 2030. Paint a picture of how business education has been transformed by new tech, AI, Metaverse and Web3.
Oh my, we challenged the students to the Future Challenge a little while ago. And I remember the first year we ran it was COVID year. And students were like, what is this? Is this Star Trek? A sci-fi storyline you're having us write? And I remember I was an associate dean then and being very assertive and saying, if we did have Star Trek, we wouldn't be teaching you over screens today. And, think about where the creativity comes and you can. And now I'm asked this question, I'm like, I know the students feel. How ridiculous am I allowed to get? I mean, it's 7 years.
Wild. That's why we call it the wild card.
Yeah.
It's 7 years. So when you think about 7 years.
And sorry to interject, but when we did that business challenge, that was 2021.
Yeah.
And now things have evolved so much in 2 years that the stuff they were coming out with then is not that kind of far away now. So
do you remember
pretty crazy.
Nam, do you remember what they said 2 years ago?
There was a mixture. I remember sitting in as well. It was a mixture of...
the plan... No, but we were talking 2020 from 30 years from now, what would happen. And I mean, one of the cohorts, I was so sad after because first we're locked in our rooms and they were like, the planet's going to be hit by an asteroid. There's going to be a pandemic that's never going to leave because that's how people were feeling, right? It was a lot of projection of this dark future because we were in a dark future. We were in this dark sense of not knowing. We didn't have any kind of vaccines or anything. We were just stuck in our houses and needed police permission to leave, and it was all of that. Yeah, I remember some of those presentations were intense. And I remember I was sitting in my bedroom, sitting through all of these final presentations because we were all virtual, and I was like, what is this? What is... And I get it. I think sometimes it reflects how we're feeling. So if we're to go down that lens, right, if it's a projection of how we're feeling, I'm actually really optimistic about, for somebody who has fear, a little bit of fear when it comes to the AI, that I'm actually using this, leveraging this role I have at Hult to eliminate some of that fear and tap into some of the minds that are talking about it. Because like I was saying in the episode, I think that we have to be careful that we don't get too complacent. So like we said, the pandemic came and even the oldest of schools were like, if we don't change and if we don't offer online, because, for the longest time, online schools, and I'm doing air quotes, were seen as lesser. Online programs, you weren't as rigorous. And now the entire world was online schools, right? So it didn't matter if you had the strongest name from the oldest school or the newest school, you were all kind of in that same bracket that was considered lesser. So the ability to transform becomes very, very important. So, we move to these texts, the camera moves as you move, and now we still have it, and we're like, this is really weird and creepy. And then I think we have to be careful not to get too stagnant in that, hey, we figured this out, now we can kind of sit back. I think that, the Metaverse, I've not been a fan of what I hear, but again, I always hear it from a very escapist, addictive kind of lens. So I do wonder if I had to switch that around to be what it could do to education, the Metaverse, to be that immersed in something. Because as an adult learner, and we are dealing with adult learners, I recognize the difficulty of breaking apart from your day. You've gone to work, you've done a lot of decision making, quick thinking, and then you're put into this let's slow down the wheel, let's think, let's use experience, let's think about, big words that you've never heard in your life, and you're, in your late 30s, 40s, whatever, and you're reckoning with all of that. But how cool would it be to have an immersive space to then find the space? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because it becomes very difficult at the end of a workday to say, I'm going to read about epistemology now. It is very difficult. So I resonate with some of our part-time students specifically who, have families and full-time jobs and demanding bosses. And, they could have awesome bosses, but that doesn't mean the demands are any less. And then they come to school and we're like, you cannot be late on an assignment and you cannot, so we're adding that pressure. So how cool would it be to use some of this tech to create more immersive spaces where students can go to be learners? And it brings about, this whole online world also brings about something that it's had a soft spot in my heart, is access to education. And I think by a lot of schools introducing it and then, finding a way to create a product around this online learning without it having the tainted, oh, it's an online program, we've now given access to people that don't have the ability to quit their lives and come out for a year and do all of that. It would be really cool to see how much more we can access, how many more people we can access, because like I said, a lot of the struggles that the business world is going to face are human struggles. So the more humans we're able to touch, the better, right? So it would be cool to do that. And if I had to get really wild for the in-person experience, I think I know it's old tech, but make it more cooler would be holograms. Think of who all you could call in to the rooms.
I'd
right?
love to send my hologram to school. Yeah.
Not sending. Okay. See, this is you thought as a student. I'm thinking as an educator, right? So I was like, no. Think of the cool minds we could bring into the classroom for the students. So in my brain as a student, I'm looking at vulnerability. I don't know if I'll ever get to meet Brené Brown, but how cool would it be if her hologram appeared and she's kind of there but not, it's kind of real time but not. But that would be a very childish desire. But I do believe that maybe I would love to see creating immersive, truly immersive spaces where you're able to escape into the world of learning a little. The same where we're able to get addicted to scrolling. It would be cool to get addicted to learning.
I'm totally on board with that vision, because I think the metaverse in particular would really give people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds more access to education, people with disabilities more access to education, so they could benefit from that. But then there's the other side of me, which is a little bit scared of living in the metaverse in the future a little bit too much.
Yeah.
If you're learning there and you're shopping in the metaverse, and we're already seeing brands doing that, when do we get the chance to connect? And back to what we were talking about in the episode, that emphasis on the human skills and the relationship building and everything that makes us human. What's the place of that into the future?
So I think there's two parts to what I'm saying. So I don't think the actual real-time teacher-learner scenario should change. I still think we need to do that in real time as much as possible. Whether it's virtually or in a classroom in person, you need to have that connection with the person that you're getting the knowledge from the rest of your peers. I think there's nothing more satisfying than learning from one another, etc. The part I was talking about, the immersive space, and I don't necessarily know if that's the metaverse, but the immersive space is for when you're left to yourself to learn. So creating a space that you can step into to say, here's everything I remember, here's maybe something I missed, so that you're in a space that you're able to learn without the distraction of everything else you have going on in your world. And that's, I think, coming, if I had to be blatantly honest, from a very selfish, part-time learner, part-time worker space that I know a lot of our students are in, but even we're in. And when I talk to our part-time students, when we say what is the biggest challenge, sometimes it's not that anything is crazy difficult. It's just that, how do I find the time? And it's not, and like my doctoral advisor says, sometimes it's not even time. Time is easy to carve out, it's space.
Mental space.
So if you say on Monday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'm going to read, what if you've had the longest, most horrible day? So maybe creating that kind of space that allows you to immerse, where you're like, hey, now this is, it's at the end of the day, if you go to watch a really good movie, I'm going to talk about the Avengers, because we all know how much I love the Avengers. But no matter, I saw the Avengers at cinema 3 or 4 times. And each time it didn't matter what my day was like. When I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I hadn't seen it, 3 times before. And that kind of immersive space to learn, I think, could create that same, like I was saying, that, I don't want to, addiction's a strong word, but when we're scrolling through things and we can't stop scrolling, what if that was how we were learning, right? What if that's how we were like, finance is so exciting, or whatever. But it was true, this immersive space. I don't know if it's the metaverse per se. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like I have a vision, and I can't, maybe one day I'll paint it for you.
Well, I think there's a whole industry that is focused on that bite-sized learning.
Yeah.
Because I think when you think about us overall and what's driving our behavior, you can't deny how much impact tech has had on how we live our lives day to day. So because we're used to spending a lot of time online and connecting with other people through our smartphones, I think a part of that cognitive behavior is going to be put onto education as well. So we are going to expect education to take some sort of shape, because our attention span is shrinking, right? And
Yes.
where does that leave us? I think that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, yes, and it's something that I have as an educator, and I'm not an academic yet. I don't believe. I believe I will be. 3 years. Watch this space. We're going to be back on this podcast. You would think. I'm trying to be very mindful. Okay, you would think what we just said. How, and we spoke about this, how are the younger students, how is Gen Z consuming content? Because how they're consuming content is how they're consuming things in the classroom. If you just have them sit for 3 hours and you're talking at them, their mind's gone. Like they're not even in the same zip code, right? We've lost them. Having said that, if you read academic journals, that some of them that are being published today, it takes you a hot minute. Right? You can't just go in and read it. I could read a Brené Brown book on vulnerability because she's using everyday language. And she's like, here's a story, here's a this. And there's the way it's written is there's theory and then there's a story. And you're like, wow, all makes sense. I was talking about this article I read, which very dramatically almost made me cry recently. But she was talking about reflexivity and grief. And it was this beautiful writing that you're like, this is incredible. But then sometimes when traditionally what academia has encouraged is language and styles of accessing information that are still very archaic. So you would think, B, that we're like, hey, bite-sized info, everyday lingo. Not true. I think that the education industry as a whole can be perceived as very elitist for these reasons, and we need to break some of those systems down.
Yeah, for sure. I think what I would like to see is that one size fits all just kind of dissected, and there be more variation, there be more choice for the different styles of learners, and it goes back to that access thing. People with dyslexia or dyspraxia or whatever the case may be, just using that as an example. But if you are kind of digesting information differently, that there is a choice for you to do that and a space for you to do that. And I feel like the metaverse could potentially
create that space.
Because it's not just looking at words or numbers on a paper or on a screen. It's kind of being digested in a different way. And I think there's an opportunity there.
Yeah,
so.
Immersive spaces, man.
And that prompts another question here around our favorite AI and personalized learning. It's exactly what you were mentioning, Mandy, that education shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. So what's your wildest prediction there now about personalized learning in the next 7 to 10 years?
Oh, my word. Personalized learning. I think that there still have to be some guardrails. Somebody has to be able to... and we can have this conversation on who decides who gets to be that person to say it's good or not. So I think the biggest piece about personalized is it comes back to where is that coming from? Because when there's information that is so easily accessible to anyone, and we are starting to personalize, do we subscribe to what we want to know more of? Yes. Do we stop reading halfway through when something doesn't resonate? Yes. So to what extent are we personalizing? How are we making someone... because I always tell students at immersion, the first class I have with them is you are not here to just voice an opinion, right? You're not here to voice an opinion. You are here to state facts. And the facts that you read, believe it or not, you're going to hear some people who are like, no, but I've heard facts that are the opposite. And that is the way of the world. And it's okay. We don't have to agree with everything. We don't have to disagree with everything, but we have to consider that the other side exists. And with that, in the same lens of then if we're going to go down and say we're going to personalize everything, are we considering that the personalization might limit a person? Now, if we're saying style, that's different, right?
I was going to say that. I think it's more
than content,
the style.
It's style. It could be, yes. And then sometimes it's a chicken or egg. Did the introduction of scrolling make this mindset of we need everything in 30-second bites? And is that a good thing? We've never asked to stop to say, is it a good thing that we're getting our information in 30-second bites? And I could argue that I don't think it is, right? I think that we should be sitting with things a little longer than we are instead of just scrolling to the next. Perhaps we shouldn't be moving in the direction of everything is bite-sized. Maybe the academics, the elitists I was talking about, they have something there where they're like, let's hold on to longer conversations about something. Let's not make our decisions so quickly. Let's just not give into our initial bias of we look at something and we think we know what it is. Let's sit with it, right? So let's be a little uncomfortable. I don't know. The answer is I don't know. But it would be really cool to have this conversation in 2030 and see, are we personalizing and are we
close enough to it?
And yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it to go on so many different angles, but I love to hear it. And I think we're in a unique position that we get to work with you every day and get to hear your different and unique points of view on a daily basis. And I actually feel quite lucky to have that opportunity. But thank you so much for,
Thank you for having me.
having this
ladies.
conversation with us. And we hope whoever's listening that you enjoyed it too. And we look forward to our next drop that you'll get in a week's time.
And for everyone listening, show Mandy and Bianca some love and come back here next week and listen to the amazing minds that they're going to bring in next.
Yeah, lots of amazing minds coming through.
Amazing. Thank you, Nam.
Thank
Thank you both.
Bye.
This was rad.